kindred spirits. So today I am going to show you how to do some draping and pattern making. We're going to be looking at an 1898 shirtwaist and taking that to the dress form and then making a pattern out of it. This video ended up getting really long and I really wanted it to be a more technical video, so I've actually split it into two. This video will be looking at prepping for going to the dress form and doing the back of the shirt, and then the next video I will show the front of the shirt and then truing up the pattern. If a technical video isn't really your cup of tea, that's perfectly okay. The next few videos will be making this shirt, and if that's more what you want to see, putting it together, that's perfectly okay. And also you can let me know that. I want to know what people want to learn about. And with that said, let's get started. So the tools you're going to want are a good pair of paper scissors and fabric scissors, as well as some weights to hold down the fabric as you're drawing out what you want, and a nice sharp pencil. I like to use drawing pencils, and a eraser that doesn't leave marks, because you're going to be doing a lot of erasing as you go. So there are several ways of going about this. The one I'm using today is I'm using a pattern that I already drafted from a Victorian drafting book. The other way you can go about this is cutting out big squares of fabric. I'm using this because I had already drafted this pattern, then decided I didn't really like the pattern and I didn't really want to do the same thing that I had originally planned. But I know that I can already use these patterns and just edit them to be the new plan that I have in my mind. So I'm not going to waste the paper, and also it allows me to not waste as much fabric because I already have some idea of the shaping and I just have to do some editing to the full pattern. So these patterns end up being way too big most of the time anyway. I'm not sure why. I'll put the book down in the description if you want to check it out. It is a good reference. I usually use it to see kind of how the construction was done and how they formed the pieces, which is really helpful for me. But when I draft from the book, for whatever reason, they're always huge. I'm not sure if that's intentional on the book's part and they're making them bigger with the intention of being able to nip in where you need to per person, or if I'm using their scaling system incorrectly, and it could be totally my user error. So I'm tracing the pattern onto linen here that I've pre-pressed. It's been crumpled up in a basket for a while, which is my bad. That's kind of how I store things, so they never fully press out, but for this it doesn't really matter. And I'm tracing everything out. I'm marking down there the center front placket so I know where it's supposed to fold, and I'm gonna cut this out with a certain amount of seam allowance, not because I'm gonna sew it, but because I like to tuck under as I'm pinning so that it has a really nice clean edge for me when I'm draping. Those clean edges make it easier for me to mark things that I need to transfer to the pattern later. Also, I just like to work neat and tidy, especially if I end up leaving this for a few days and coming back to it at a later point. I want to be able to take just a glance at it and know where I need to pick up with the project. With the fabric prepped, we need to go ahead and grab some pins, bright colored markers for marking out where our pattern lines are going to be, as well as a ruler, especially because we're going to be doing some tucks in this pattern and it's much easier to do uniform tucks if you have a ruler. And also one of the tucks is in the back and it's going to be split in half for the pattern, and I'm going to need to make sure that I've measured that out and I know how wide the full tuck ends up being. And now we can start draping. I love this process. So with the fabric on the mannequin, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pin center back. I always work from center back, or at least center side depending on the piece, but usually center back and center front. Then once I have center back pinned down and it's straight, I'm going to pin out the shoulder and then pin out the arm's eye as well. So when I'm draping, there's a lot of going back and forth between Delineator pictures and what I'm draping to make sure that I'm getting the overall feel of the piece and seeing where they had certain things hitting. So I'll go back and forth to see where they have the arm's eye, where they have the yoke, and then I can edit that to fit what I need for my body shape. Now with the yoke part done and I have what I want, I mark out the neckline, the shoulder line, center back, and as well as that little start of the arm's eye. I'm looking back and forth between the picture to see where the yoke is hitting on the body and the kind of curve that it desires. With the yoke complete, I can then start on the shirring. So I'm going to again start with the center back and pinning that out, and I'm also going to pin at the shoulder because those two places are going to be my secure lines while I am deciding where the tucks are and how I want to place the tucks and get the right angles for that. For this shirring, the picture shows one box pleat at the center back and another box pleat on either side. They're angled into the waist to give it a slimming effect, so I need to make sure that the tucks are placed at that angle to give my back a slimmer look. The other thing I need to keep in mind is the center back box pleat, because I'm going to cut this pattern piece on a fold. I need to make sure that I keep in mind that that box pleat needs to be half of the full width that I need. This honestly took me quite a while to figure out, and there was a lot of faffing around. You're seeing my first attempt right here, and honestly, it didn't have the right angles, and I ended up having to completely take it out and redo it. Trying to get that angle that they have in the picture was honestly pretty difficult. The fabric was kind of fighting me on it, as well as I have kind of weird curves, so I was trying to get it to sit the way I wanted it to sit, and I really want it to have that slimming effect because I really like it, and it just took me quite a while to get a design that I liked, especially since when I graded it to the waist, it was acting funky, so I kept having to take out the waist part even when I had the top the way I liked it in order to get it to smooth nicely. I also kept measuring the back pleat because I was really afraid that when I finished everything, the back pleat would be so large that it was going to look ginormous when I had it both sides done. So I wanted to make sure that the box pleat in the back was slightly larger to the ones on either side of it, but wasn't gargantuan compared to the others. With it graded into the waist and everything smoothed out the way I like it, I am pretty happy with this design. The reason I needed to make sure it was smoothed into the waist is this design has a waistband, but then keeps going below the waistband to give it some length into the skirt. I'm also going ahead and checking the center back to make sure it's straight so I can cut it without an issue on a fold, as well as to make sure that that tuck is going to sit just right on that center back and not look funky on either side. The other thing I'm going to add are two gussets, one closer to center back and one closer to side. This is because the difference between my waist and hip, it has a bit of drama there. It's pretty different, and I don't want it to catch funky going over that curve, so I'm going to put in the gusset so it smooths better and I have more room as well to move around. So I'm also just going to quickly add in the pieces of fabric and pin them into those gussets with how long and how wide I want the piece of fabric that's being inserted to be. I'm also going to use a marker to show the edges on the piece of fabric I insert so that I know the dimensions of that gusset for when I make the pattern. So I'm using the marker again to mark out where all my lines are, front, the arm's eye, the center back, where those gussets go, as well as where the tucks are so that I can mark out where the tucks need to be for it, and I don't have to measure out the entire thing again. I can just match up the lines. With the marks drawn, that is the end of the back and it is complete. So I will see you next time to do the front and then true up the pattern onto paper. I hope you enjoyed this. Let me know if this kind of tutorial and longer version, more detailed tutorial is something you want to keep seeing. And until next time, happy sewing, my friends.